AEW World Champion, acclaimed actor, rock singer, Fozzy, author, TV show host, TV personality. Don the Bubbly, and the title is right there too. It's Chris Jericho, Le Champion. AEW Wrestling is here in Coral Gables, Miami, South Florida for AEW Dynamite live on TNT on Wednesday, January 15th, which is tomorrow, at the Watsco Center at the University of Miami. Champ, tell us about AEW coming to Miami.
That was quite the intro.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds almost like we're on the radio. Is this a radio show?
No, we'll put the video up, so yeah, it'll be
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting to come to all these cities that I've been to so many times before, but for the first time with AEW. So, Miami, we had WrestleMania here. We had shows here for years and years and years. But to come here with AEW, it's big because it's, I love the fact that we're nationwide right out of the gate, going all across the country, and coming to Miami, which is it's a great wrestling city. It's a great Jericho city, and I think there's every indication it's going to be a great AEW city as well.
It's interesting because it started with TV. A lot of wrestling companies, when they start, you really don't start with big national
Well, and that's what
TV.
we were saying earlier in your first question that we talked about. I mean, I think one of the reasons why AEW has such a fan base, a loyal fan base, is because they're getting a chance to be a part of it from the beginning. I liken it to my affinity and fandom for Metallica, and I got into them in 1985, right after their first record came out. And I kind of grew up with Metallica. I saw them build and grow and become who they are. And I felt great pride in that. This is kind of the same thing. To see our very first show, like I mentioned, in front of 14,000 people and watched by 1.5 million on TNT network, that's a big deal. And you're not going to see that and you've never seen that before from another wrestling company to start that big right out of the gate. So it's very exciting from that respect because it is a TV product. We don't go do the Sunday afternoon, live events. I think it's kind of a antiquated way of doing things. It seems very archaic to have guys going to work 4 nights a week when TV's where basically all the revenue comes from and where all the focus is. So we don't really need the busy work. We're focusing on what's important, which is, putting eyeballs in the company and building that aspect of it, which is where you can really become a financial, moneymaker.
And that's interesting too, because just with social media and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, everything else that's out there, TV is great, but then social media adds a whole nother caveat to it.
Well, yeah, it's a different world now. Like I said, this whole company was basically started on social media. If you look at the fact that our first, if you include the All In show, then All Out and Double or Nothing, these are shows that sold out in an hour with zero television exposure. All it was word of mouth and some well-placed vignettes and movies and vlogs and that sort of thing. And suddenly everybody's talking about it. So it was really interesting, I think, to see that reaction and to know there's fans out there who have money that want to spend it in wrestling on something new.
What have you enjoyed most about AEW so far?
I think just the fact that it exists, for one. The fact that it was basically built on my shoulders out of the gate. I think having Chris Jericho involved really kind of legitimized them as a company to have a real, not to stroke my own ego, but a real big name that everyone knows. And to go, wow, Jericho's there? Like, we've heard of Kenny Omega or the Bucks, or we kind of know Cody, but Chris Jericho, I mean, that's a WWE cornerstone at this point. So to kind of have that pressure and to see it pay off has been really, really rewarding. And, just the whole creative vibe in AEW is so much different from WWE. There's not a team of writers kind of following you along and giving you here's your promo, read this, it's approved by whoever. I like the fact that there's no approval. I have to approve it myself and do it myself. And it's a little bit scary, live without a net, but I think it really shows who has who's got the chops. You have to get over on your own, the way that wrestling always was up until about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when writers became a real part of the game.
In this show in Miami, it's going to be a great show, and DDP will be on the show as well. What are your thoughts of Diamond Dallas Page? The guy's in phenomenal shape with his DDP yoga and everything he's done there, and helped a lot of people.
I think it's something that we do really well in AEW is we use the legends in the right moments. You know, Arn Anderson with us, and we've had, you know, there's been different guys that you've seen. I mean, Tully Blanchard and you know, guys that have popped in and out. I think using DDP is very smart because he has a real close relationship with the Rhodes family, you know, with Dusty, and then Cody's kind of always been his kind of young apprentice, shall we say. So when we have him come in, it means something. And we don't have him come in just to get beat up by whoever the flavor of the month is, which is something that other companies do. Let's bring a legend in and embarrass him. We bring a legend in and use him in the right spot. So yeah, he is 63, but he is in great shape. And, you know, he could probably, cardio-wise, outlast most people 20, 30 years less than him. So it's the right place, it's the right spot, and I think people will be excited to see him have that match because DDP is a very big star. But also we're not hitching the cart to him. But I think there's a great kind of, you know, it's cool to kind of see if you use somebody in the right guest casting. You know, it always works out well.
Chris, what is the Inner Circle?
I mean, how do you mean? That's a pretty open-ended question.
How do you describe it?
I think it's just you know, I think it's a group of 5 guys who were all chosen for their specific personalities, their specific wrestling styles. And I think right out of the gate, once again, that was in episode 1, we really set the tone for what AEW is. And everyone's become a much bigger star because of the Inner Circle, including me, because you have a very exciting faction that there's a reason for. It's not just throwing a bunch of guys together for no apparent reason. And like I said, when you look at everybody who's in there, it really makes sense. You got a great tag team of street thugs. You've got, you know, Sammy Guevara, who's just got that quality about him that people don't like, but he's also a great looking guy that the girls do like. He's the bad boy, super talented in the ring, kind of become my co-pilot when it comes to promos and all that sort of stuff. And then you got Jake Hagar, who we've totally reinvented, who's an undefeated MMA fighter at this point in time, and we've pushed him that way. And we've made him into that. So I think it's been a really cool few months with the Inner Circle, and we're just getting started because you can base whole storylines around it. John Moxley, come be a part of the Inner Circle. And so very excited about what we created. And what we needed to do right out of the gate, and we knew this, was to create stars. It can't just be all about Chris Jericho or you know, we had a godsend, we got John Moxley, and you know, we have guys that people have seen and are very familiar with, but we also have to build our own guys, which is what we've done very quickly. If you look at Sammy Guevara, MJF, Darby Allin, Scorpio Sky, Jungle Boy is now starting to get more steam, Luchasaurus, and really starting to put a lot more focus on Hangman Page. These are homegrown stars. And that's what you have to do to really make it as the alternative company. It's great to have a couple guys from WWE if we can get them. If we don't, we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on building our own guys that we can start from scratch, and people go, oh, Sammy Guevara, that's AEW.
Chris, 30 years in the business. What an incredible ride, and still at a high level. Any secret to it?
I just think a commitment. When I started getting burned out, I left. When I started feeling creatively unfulfilled, I made changes. Constant reinvention, but not forced. Every kind of aspect of my character through the years has been something that I just feel is right. When you say Le Champion, like, you couldn't say that unless you had total commitment to it to know that you could get it over. If not, it's just like it's a fake French word that doesn't really, sounds kind of dumb, but if you say it with conviction and believe it, suddenly everyone's calling you Le Champion. They think it's fun to say. So if you look from Le Champion to Painmaker to a little bit of the bubbly to the List to, you know, It to Y2J and the suit and tie hypocrite guy and all those phases of Chris Jericho were all where I was at the time. You know, I couldn't go back and play Y2J the same way that, Robert Plant doesn't want to go sing Led Zeppelin songs anymore. He just doesn't feel it. It's one of the reasons why I went to AEW, because I knew if I go back to WWE, the first thing they're going to want me to do is put somebody on the list, and I just don't feel that anymore. I feel it's almost like a nostalgia thing, and I don't want to be that. So I constantly have to recreate and rediscover and be something new. And I said it in an interview a few weeks ago, if you like what I'm doing, enjoy it, because once I'm finished with it, I'm not going to come back to it.
Chris, 30 years, and I was reading a lot of the history too. Is this the first time you're leading a stable?
Yeah, it's the first time I'm leading the stable. It's the first time I've been kind of the top. Well, in New Japan, I was kind of the top guy. But the top guy, I never was this. I call myself the George Harrison of the Attitude Era. And what I mean by that is I was in, George Harrison, one of the greatest songwriters and musicians ever. Only problem is he's in a band with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, the two greatest ever. I was a babyface in the Attitude Era, huge, super popular, but I was a babyface along with The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. So I would never be the top guy there. I could be the top heel, which I was for many years. But here it's more about what can Chris Jericho do for the AEW to really continue to get this company on the map and get it to grow. I think when you look at the initial sales or the initial fact that I was the first champion, I think it had a lot of bearing for us to get on TNT in the first place. They had a name they could hang their hat on. I know that everyone's making a lot more money in the business because I came here, which therefore got raises for everybody in the WWE. So it's been a real kind of time to 30 years in, to show just how valuable I can be as a draw, shall we say. So yeah, the first time I've ever been the head of a faction, and the first time basically I've ever been in a faction. And there's a reason for that. I don't really play well with others. I never wanted that. I remember back in '98, one of the suggestions was for me to be in the nWo, and I was like, absolutely not. There's 15 guys in the nWo. They don't need me, and I don't need them. So this is something, like I said, for the Inner Circle, it definitely enhances my character, enhances our storylines, and gave 4 very talented individuals a much bigger platform and got them all over to a much bigger degree as well.
You mentioned Jake, and I know he's doing tremendous with MMA. One Championship is an MMA company that's actually on TNT. We have AEW Wrestling Dynamite, AEW Dynamite on TNT. Do you think a pro wrestling MMA crossover event? I think Japan had done that in the past. Do you think that's something that could work here?
I don't think so, because when Japan did it, there's still a line was blurred between what the UWF was at the time, which was the MMA company. Half shoot, half wrestling. It's going to be all or nothing. It's either all a shoot or it's all not. So I think basically what we're doing with Jake, where he's working for Bellator, and those fights are very real, and then he comes and works with us where he's playing that character, which has a lot of realism to it because of what he's doing outside of the AEW world. And people watch that stuff. It's one of the reasons why Brock Lesnar is still so intimidating to this day. Besides the fact that he's a beast, is also the fact that he is legit. He was a legit, UFC champion, or close to it. If he wasn't, I'm not sure exactly if he was. I can't recall. But point being that there's a line there that you can go, listen, this guy's the real deal. Here's the proof. So we can do that with Jake because it's the same with him. 3 fights in, and being undefeated, with some big fights coming up. The better he does within Bellator, the more valuable and better he is for AEW.
Might we? Yes, we're gonna wrap it up. Might we see the Inner Circle walking him to the ring at an MMA Bellator event?
Well, we had that. The last Bellator fight, Sammy and Santana Ortiz were there with him. So we've already done it, and absolutely. Whether or not I'll be there, I'm not sure, but I'm watching.
And lastly, I want to mention AEW Dynamite on TNT live at the Watsco Center, University of Miami, Wednesday, January 15th, which is tomorrow. It's going to be a great event, a great night. South Florida debut for AEW. Lastly, what's going on with Fozzy? Will Fozzy be touring, making records, anything coming up with Fozzy?
Yeah, our song Nowhere to Run is number 12 on the rock charts right now, so hopefully it hits top 10, which will be our 3rd top 10 and our 5th top 30. And we're going out on tour again in April, which I think is when our next single is going to come out. So we're working on a new record, but now we're on Sony Records, and they just want to have a single to continue the momentum. So it's the new world. You don't just do a record and put a single out. Now you just put singles out and make a record around it. So everything's going great for us, and we're looking forward to getting back on the road in April.
Thank you, Chris Jericho.
Nailed it.